to fix the wall here, that's easy enough. I can just move my wall up a little higher here. Okay, I can do that, scale that up, just select the vertices on it and move those up. Okay, like that, and that should take care of it. Full resolution. So what does that full resolution look like? So under full resolution now, when you're ready, get everything set up, and you can use preview render. Okay, so I'm not saying you can't. So if you go into Arnold and go to Arnold Render View and you do a rendering of that, it's gonna take a lot longer to process. Still trying to figure it out here. There we go. Okay, so now I can match these up probably a little better this way. See, I'm close. Look at that. So the ghosting is right here. So what I want to do is I want to move that a little bit. You can see how it's moving. So those matched up. There we go. Getting closer. Rotating a little bit. Rotating a little bit. There we go. Really close. Yes, it's painful. And that looks really good. That looks pretty close. Okay. And then I've still got that issue right here that I need to fix. But other than that, I think it's looking pretty good. So once the preview's done, then after you fix the things that you need to fix, I'm going to rotate that probably like that. And maybe, let's do this, heighten it up a little bit. Still getting through there for some reason, even though it's tall. Might even do this, rotate it a little bit and move it over. There we go. There we go. That looks good. And then your final render will be a very high resolution, and it could take up to an hour. So on the settings here, you're going to want that to go to 6, this to go to 3, 3, and 3, ray depth to 12, diffuse to 3, specular to 3, transmission to 10, and transparency depth to 12. And that's that setting for that. And then we got the Commons tab. Commons tab, you're going to go in here and select HD 1080. Okay. So those are the two and that's basically all you have to do to set that up. And make sure your renderable camera is your perspective, if that's what you have, or whatever perspective you're actually rendering. We're not rendering any animation, so you don't need to mess with that. You do need to tell it where to go. So once you render, okay, at that resolution, it's going to take like a half an hour. And we don't have the time to do that in here, but that'll be your final piece. And then when you're done, it should look something like I showed you before in my images here on what your object should look like. And all these have been treated in Photoshop and color corrected. Okay, all these images that I did here have been color corrected and lightened and have been fixed. Okay? All right. Okay, so it's perfectly okay for you not to have an HDR image. You would set it up like I showed you before. Okay? And then you wouldn't have your double ghosting shadows that you have to deal with. Okay? So that actually takes away stuff. And I'm okay with that white background like that. That's okay. All right? You can see some progressions, stuff that I had in and stuff that I didn't have in. All right. One last thing that it would be nice to see you guys do is a ambient occlusion pass. Okay, what is it? What is that, and how does that work? An ambient occlusion pass. So you got your beauty pass, okay, and then you've got your ambient occlusion pass. Okay, the ambient occlusion pass, when you multiply it over top of the image, will give you a lot more depth. It will add a lot more depth to your scene. Okay, so so beauty pass is what I just showed you. So you would render out a beauty pass, and once you render that out, you want to keep the same camera shot. So if I were to do this, it would basically be low resolution render. And let me get it back to where it should be. Let me close that up a minute. And so let's say I'm going to do a shot like, let's just focus on this area here maybe. Okay. So we definitely want to set it up for a beauty shot. That would be this high resolution, right? And then you want to do an ambient occlusion. So you'd save your scene, right? Save your scene. And then what I do is, for an ambient occlusion, I just select everything, minus the background and lights, if you have any lights in here. So I'm going to turn off those lights, right? And what I'm going to do is make sure nothing's selected except for the items in your scene. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click over this and go to assign new material. Now if you assign new material and you save this, you just lost all your textures. So you always save your scene before you do this. And we're going to click on ambient occlusion. Okay? And that's going to like destroy all your textures. So just realize it will do that. Okay? And then you basically will start rendering your scene. Okay, so you'll have to set that pretty low again, and 2 and 2 and 2, so it renders out quickly. And let's go back to 2 on these, 8 on this one, and 10 on this one. Close it, and you render it out. Basically render it out. Now this is really dark, but that's your first ambient occlusion pass. That's nothing, I'm not really doing anything to it. And I love to show my artwork off with an ambient occlusion. Like the way it's set off right now, it kind of shows off your modeling a little bit. It's really grainy, you know, but it still shows off your modeling, which is really cool. So to get the grain out, let me turn that off. You can't really use this as ambient occlusion, but you can use it as showing your models off. But one thing it did show me is that I need to have my camera AA set up to around 6 to get rid of the what I call just kind of the, I don't know, errors, rendering errors in there. So rendering errors are all the pixelation. So I'm going to go in here and render that again, pop that in, you can see the difference between it. It'll render a little bit slower. Off. 1. Spread, let's go to 0.8 on that one. There we go. And what you do is you have your camera set up for the beauty pass, you render that out, you save that out, right, as a beauty pass, and then you render this out as an ambient occlusion. And then you bring the beauty pass into Photoshop, and you bring the ambient occlusion into Photoshop. You hold down the shift key and lay that over top. And then you multiply the ambient occlusion over top of the beauty pass, and it will give you some really neat effect. And really adds shadows, defined shadows to it. So this is going to take a while. I'm going to go ahead and pause it, okay? And so basically, once that's done, you will save this scene out. And so what I'm going to do is, let's look at the beauty pass and the AO pass within Photoshop. So here's my beauty pass. I've got that saved out. You know how to do that. And this is my AO pass, okay, which I just closed. And this is my AO pass. You can see I did several of them. Look how many I did. I did quite a few. Right? Cool. The one with the white background is the one I want. I'm going to go ahead and drag these two into the same scene. There we go. I just dragged and dropped those two in there. Here's my AO. Okay, hit enter. There we go. Here's my AO. Look at that. So AO's dropped over top. Now, if you don't drag and drop them into Photoshop and you input those, they'll input separately. So how do you do that? So if I didn't have this in and I wanted a file open, boy, that's slow. Okay, there we go. Desktop and images, and it's the first one. Open that up. There'll be two separate, so you have to move that down, and you'll click on the selection button and you hold down the shift key and drag it over into here, and the shift key lets you place it right over top, just like that. And then what you do is you multiply it. Boom. Now look at the difference. Look at that. Huge differences. It just pop. Look at the door frame when I turn it off and on. It pops it out. Look at that. It's beautiful. It adds that detail that you would normally not have from and there's nothing you can do in Photoshop to make that better. So it's only an AO map that actually lets you do that. Okay? Very cool. So what are the settings again for my AO map that I ended up with? It is, close that a minute. So my AO map was samples at 4, spread at 0.8, and fall off at 1. Those are the only things that I changed. 4, 0.8, and 1. Cool. All right. Then you know how to do everything else. Once you do that, you're good to go. You'll start saving your renderings out. Make sure you give yourself lots of time to render. Don't try to do everything in one day. You're going to have to spend the Friday and Saturday just get everything done modeling, and then spend time get everything textured. And then I want you to start doing the nighttime scene. Do not do an ambient occlusion in the nighttime. It doesn't look good. But if you want to try, I'm not going to grade you on this. You don't have to do an ambient occlusion. But if you add it, I think it'll look much better for the daytime scene. Okay? Perfect. All right, guys. Thank you.